Jesus reveals how to hear God's voice and train your mind to rest in Him. Have you ever felt like you're screaming inside, but the sky remains silent, as if you begged for an answer, for a sign, for anything, and what came back was just the echo of your own pain? Have you ever wondered, alone in a dark room, if God still speaks? And more than that, if He still speaks to you? There are times when the noise in our minds is so deafening that it seems impossible to hear any other voice, let alone the voice of God. Anxiety, racing thoughts, worries that multiply without respite, the tired soul, the restless heart, and the faith almost disappearing. It is in this invisible place where no one sees that many now live. You may seem strong on the outside, but inside, you're begging for rest. And that's where it all starts. Because what you're about to discover in this video isn't just a message. It's a reunion with the voice that never stopped calling you. A forgotten truth, ignored by many. But today, Jesus reveals to you with depth, grace, and power. This is not an empty promise. It's a path that few see, but that changes everything when you finally listen. And most people never realize that, but today they will. Get ready, because what you will hear can transform the way you relate to God, to your thoughts, and to your peace. Today, Jesus reveals to you not only how to hear His voice, but how to silence your mind to finally rest in Him, and perhaps for the first time in a long time, feel truly safe. This journey will delve deeply into real pain, emotions that you may never have been able to put into words, but that Jesus always understood. And in the midst of every pain, there will be an answer, a story, a revelation, a whisper that, even in the midst of chaos, still echoes. If you learn to listen, take a deep breath, and open your heart, because this isn't just a video, it's a date. It's a sacred space where your tired soul can finally rest. And before we dive into the truths that will touch your spirit, I need to tell you something. You are not here by chance. Jesus brought you here for a reason, and that reason will start to reveal itself now. If this message is touching your heart, write in the comments, "I want to hear your voice, Jesus." Just like that, but deep enough to open a spiritual door. Your comment could be the encouragement someone needs today. What's more, it can be your own act of faith, of surrender, of outcry. And if you feel that this word has already started to touch something inside you, press the like button. It's not just a like, it is a gesture that makes this message reach more people who, like you, are silent, waiting to hear God's voice. Like it for you. Like it for those who are yet to arrive. Enjoy it as if to say, "I believe that Jesus still speaks." Now, get ready, because what's about to happen in the next few minutes will change how you listen to God and how you silence the storm inside you. Don't leave this video. Jesus revealed something very important, and you need to hear it before you leave. The cave was dark, cold, silent. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe, but consumes. Elijah, the prophet who had faced kings, defied multitudes, and seen fire from heaven fall before hundreds, was now in hiding, afraid, exhausted, and in complete inner collapse. After a moment of spiritual glory in which he saw God act in a supernatural way, the weight came. The weight of the threat, the persecution, the exhaustion. Jezebel had sworn to kill him, and his soul, once steadfast, was now broken. He ran, not from physical enemies, but from the pain of continuing. He isolated himself, and in that dark place, he prayed not for deliverance, but for death. "Enough is enough, Lord. Take my life." Have you ever felt this? Have you ever experienced this contrast? Those days when it seems like you were so close to God, so firm in your faith, and suddenly something knocked you down. A piece of news, a loss, a disappointment, or sometimes nothing happened on the outside, but on the inside, everything fell apart. And then you try to pray, but the words don't come out. You try to sing, but your voice breaks. You try to trust, but God's silence screams louder than any praise. Elijah was like that, a man of deep faith, immersed in a spiritual void. But it is at this moment that something extraordinary happens. God appears, but not in the way Elijah imagined. First, a strong wind passes in front of the cave, so strong that it shatters the rocks. But God was not in the wind. Then an earthquake. The earth shakes, roars. But God was not in the earthquake. Then a fire, burning, powerful. But God was not in the fire. After all this comes a whisper, soft, delicate, almost imperceptible. And it is in this whisper that Elijah recognizes the presence of God. This deconstructs everything, because most of us expect to encounter God in moments of impact, in miracles, in signs, in spiritual fireworks. But Jesus reveals something transformative to you. There are times when he chooses to whisper, because the whisper demands silence, and silence demands surrender. When everything around us is noise, mental confusion, Jesus wants to teach us to close our eyes, quiet our hearts, and listen to the sound of his voice that does not come to impress us, but to transform us. Have you ever wondered why God seems silent when you need to hear it most? Have you ever cried asking, "Lord, why don't you answer me?" Perhaps the answer is deeper than we imagine. Maybe he is speaking, but not in the tone we expect. Maybe he is waiting for you to slow down, to listen, because God's voice often comes not in the midst of fire or earthquake, but in the soft whisper that whispers, "I am here. I have never left you." And here comes the twist, because many think that silence is absence. But in the Bible, God's silence is not abandonment, it is preparation. Elijah, after hearing this whisper, receives clear instructions. He discovers that he is not alone, that there are still 7,000 who have not bowed to Baal. And more than that, God sends him back with a new purpose. Silence was not a punishment. It was a divine break to reposition your soul. How often is your mind racing so much that you mistake silence for rejection? But Jesus does not reject you in silence. He invites your mind to rest, your soul to trust, your spirit listening. Because it is in rest, and not in rush, that he speaks most deeply. Maybe today, right now, Jesus is trying to talk to you. And all he needs is for you to stop trying to control everything. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and listen. Have you ever felt like Elijah? Emotionally hidden, running away from thoughts, from anxiety, from yourself? So listen to this with all your heart. Jesus reveals to you that you don't need any more noise. You need more holy silence. Because in that silence, he will restore what the world and your mind tried to destroy. If this message is touching your heart, tell us in the comments, "I trust in Jesus." This statement may seem simple, but to a weary soul, it is a cry of faith. And your comment could be the breath of life that someone on the other side of the screen is desperately waiting to read. And if this word really spoke to you, press the like button now. Because this isn't just a like, it's an act of faith. It's like saying, "Jesus, I heard your whisper." And when you do, that message reaches other souls who, like you, are hiding in emotional caves, waiting for a voice that says, "You are not alone." But there is something even deeper. Something that happens when anxiety doesn't let you pray, when your mind keeps screaming even when you try to shut up. That's where Jesus reveals to you the secret of true rest, not just in the body, but in the mind that never stops. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about now. Ready to find out what Jesus did when two women, one eager and one silent, met him face to face? Get ready. What happens next will change the way you view silence, prayer, and rest. The house was full. The smell of food spread through the air, the pans rattled, and Marta's steps ran from one side to the other. She wanted everything perfect. Jesus had arrived. The Master, the Holy One, the Son of the living God was under his roof. And like a good hostess, she wanted to serve. Do your best. Honor with your hand. But there was something wrong. Because the more she tried, the more her soul stirred. Jesus' presence was there, but his mind was elsewhere. The noise of the pan, the mental list of tasks, the discomfort of seeing her sister, Mary, sitting at the feet of Jesus without lifting a finger. All of this exploded inside her, and Marta explodes. "Lord, don't you mind that my sister leaves me alone with the work? Tell her to help me!" A complaint, almost an accusation, almost a plea, not against Maria, but against the silence that bothered her. Because Marta wasn't just overloaded with tasks, she was internally overwhelmed, like many of us. Have you ever tried to pray and your mind didn't cooperate? Have you ever felt that, even though you try to be with God, your thoughts are in 1,000 places? You kneel, but the weight of what you need to do, pay, resolve, understand, all of this invades your mind like a storm. And in the midst of it all, frustration comes. Why can't I rest like others? Why can't my mind turn off? Why am I here, but I'm not here? And then the voice of Jesus enters, a voice that does not condemn but corrects with love. "Marta, Marta, you are restless and worry about many things, but only one is necessary. Maria chose the best part, and that will not be taken away from her." Jesus was not rejecting service. He wasn't neglecting the effort. But here Jesus reveals a disconcerting truth. Serving is not always the same as giving oneself. Sometimes doing too much is what prevents you from receiving what is essential. Martha was with Jesus in the house, but Mary was with Jesus in her heart. Have you ever felt like Martha? Doing everything right on the outside, but on the inside, completely out of place? Trying to serve God, but with your mind filled with voices of demands, of haste, of fear? Maria chose to stop, to sit, to listen, rest. She wasn't doing anything, but she was getting everything. And that's what resting the mind in God teaches us. When you slow down on the outside, God starts working on the inside. Maria was not running away from responsibilities. She was positioning herself in the only place where the soul is cared for, at the feet of the Master. And this place is not physical, it's spiritual. You can be in your bedroom, in your living room, in the middle of traffic, but if you stop inside, shut up inside, place yourself at the feet of Jesus, even without words, even without strength, he begins to speak. And the mind that torments you, begins to align itself with the peace that only he can give. And here comes the revelation. The enemy of your peace is not the chaos of the world. It is the acceleration of your mind. Because while your soul runs after a solution, Jesus waits for you to just feel. He wants to talk, but you need to shut up. He wants to comfort you, but you need to stop. Maria discovered this. Marta, at that moment, no. But what about you? How? Many times have you found yourself praying but thinking about the bill due tomorrow? In the conversation you need to have? In the fear that still screams inside you? Jesus is not demanding effort from you. He is inviting you to rest, a rest. That does not come after everything has been resolved, but that comes first, so that everything can be resolved with him at the center. And there is something even deeper here. Jesus said that Mary's share will not be taken away from her. This is powerful, because everything you earn with effort can be lost. But what you receive in intimacy with Jesus remains. The peace that comes from him is unshakable. The word that comes from him is eternal. The rest that comes from him is complete. Even when the house is full, even when everything around remains the same. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath and imagine Jesus in the room of your soul right now. He doesn't want you to clean the house. He wants you to sit. He is not asking for a feast. He wants your presence. He doesn't want you to say the right words. He just wants you. And when you stop, when you quiet your mind, when you give up control, he speaks, not with thunder, but tenderly, with direction, with healing. You need to hear this. Jesus reveals to you that your mind can rest, and that resting is not giving up. It is trusting. It's letting go of trying to control everything and just sitting at his feet. Peace does not come when everything is resolved. Peace comes when you understand that at his feet, everything is already in the right hands. If this word embraced you today, if you felt that Jesus spoke to you, write in the comments, "Jesus, I choose to listen to you." Perhaps this statement is the beginning of a new way of praying, a new way of trusting, a new way of living. And remember, your comment could be the comfort that another restless soul is seeking right now. But that's Still not all, because there comes a time when even rest seems dangerous, when doubt screams louder than faith, and making any decision seems scary. It is at this point, where the mind gets stuck, that Jesus reveals another way of hearing his voice, a way that brings security even in the midst of uncertainty. What happens next can completely change how you choose to listen to God in the face of fear. Get ready for something unexpected, because sometimes the sign you're looking for doesn't come from the sky. It comes from within your own journey. It was night. The wind was blowing through the trees, and Gideon, hidden in a wine press, a place made for treading grapes, was kneading wheat, a strange, almost incoherent gesture. Wheat doesn't grow there, but when fear dominates, we do whatever we can to survive. Gideon was afraid. Fear of the Midianites, fear of war, fear of hunger, fear of failure, but above all, fear of making mistakes. He was not a leader. He was not a warrior. He was just another man trying not to attract attention in the chaos. But it was precisely there, in that attempt to go unnoticed, that the angel of the Lord appeared and said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." How many times have you felt this way? Trying to move forward, but inside, fighting with the fear of taking a step in the wrong direction, trying to discern whether the next decision will lead you to purpose or collapse. The mind goes to war. Is it God guiding me, or am I trying to force a response? The heart cries for clarity, but the soul only hears silence. And when you think about following, something stops you. What if it's the wrong way? What if I'm mistaken? Gideon also doubted. Even after hearing the divine greeting, he questioned, "If the Lord is with us, why did all this happen to us?" It was as if he said, "How can God be with me if I can't hear his direction?" Then he asks for a sign, then asks for another, then one more. And God, with the patience that only he has, responds to each one. Not because God needed to prove something, but because Gideon needed to learn something. Hearing God's voice is not about being absolutely certain, but about trusting the presence even in doubt. Jesus reveals to you that God is not bothered by your requests for confirmation. He does not withdraw when you are in inner conflict. He approaches. Gideon wanted signs, and God gave them. But the greatest sign was not the dew on the wool or the dry field. It was the presence of God in the midst of indecision. The Lord did not wait for Gideon to feel safe to call him. He called him while he was still scared. And here comes the key. God called him a mighty warrior before he even picked up a sword, before he wins any battle, before he even believed in himself. Because God doesn't speak from your perception of identity. He speaks from the truth that only he sees. And that voice, that identity that he releases, breaks the shackles of fear. Gideon was hiding in fear of making mistakes, but God saw him as someone destined to deliver. And this vision changes everything. Maybe you are in that place right now, with decisions in front of you and fear that any step could be a disaster. You pray, but you feel no direction. You ask, but no answer comes. You fast, but silence remains, so you back off, because deciding in the dark is terrifying. But Jesus reveals to you that his presence does not depend on your clarity. It sustains you even in the darkness. Gideon asked for external signs, but the greatest confirmation was within him. The call. Have you ever stopped to think that the fear of making mistakes can also be a disguise for insecurity about who you really are? Gideon thought he was the smallest in his family, from the weakest tribe. But God saw it as the key to a new cycle for all the people. He didn't need courage to be called. He needed the call to awaken courage. Close your eyes now. Take a deep breath. Imagine Jesus calling you by name and saying, "I am with you. Go in your strength." He's not waiting for you to feel 100% right. He wants you to move by faith, because faith is not the absence of doubt. Faith is continuing even when doubt screams. And on this path, God's voice becomes clearer. Peace comes not before decision, but after obedience. If this word touched you in some way, if you saw yourself in Gideon, write in the comments with faith and courage, "Jesus guides me." Declare this as a delivery, like a sincere request, like a step of surrender. Because sometimes all God expects is for you to say, "Lord, I don't know which way to go, but I know that if you are with me, I can walk." And if this message brought light to your soul, press the like button. This simple act can make that word reach another person who, at this very moment, is also trying to make an important decision. But fear is paralyzing them. Your gesture of faith can free more than one life, but that's not all. There is an even deeper pain, not that of deciding, but of feeling spiritually distant from God, as if, no matter how hard he tried, the connection was broken. The heart wants to return, but the soul carries guilt, confusion, and shame. And it is exactly at this point, when you feel unworthy of hearing God's voice, that Jesus reveals something to you that can radically change the way you approach him. What happens next isn't just a homecoming story. It is a revelation of how the mind finds rest when the heart returns to the Father. It was deep in the valley of shame that he realized something that would change everything. The scene is silent, but carries the weight of a contained scream. The youngest son, dirty, hungry, his eyes dull, contemplating leftover food destined for pigs. He was no longer the bold young man who had left with his inheritance in hand and his chest full of dreams. Now, there, in the middle of the mud and the piercing silence of guilt, all that was left was an echo. Am I still a son? The distance between him and his father was not just geographic, it was emotional, it was spiritual. A distance made up of wrong choices, thoughtless decisions, and a heart that thought it was self-sufficient. It's not difficult to identify with him. How many times have we felt like this, far from God, even when he has never turned away? How many times does the weight of our failures make us believe that we have gone too far, that we are past the point of return, that the internal confusion is too great to be deciphered? The pain of spiritual distance does not hurt the body, but it corrodes the soul. It's the kind of emptiness that not even sleep can fill. The mind tries to rationalize, tries to pretend that everything is fine, but something deep down whispers, "You got lost." And this is a silent pain because it is rarely shared. We go to church, post verses, sing praises, but inside we feel as if we are in a strange land, far from God's embrace. But the Bible shows us something absolutely scandalous and deeply restorative. The prodigal son was still far away, and the father saw him. This changes everything. He hadn't even said anything. He hadn't asked for forgiveness yet. He had not shown regret with words, but his father saw him, and more than that, ran to him. In a culture where patriarchs didn't run, this gesture was a scandal of grace. A father who runs. That doesn't wait for justifications. Who interrupts the blame speech with a hug. Who transforms rags into garments of honor. This is not just a parable. It is a portrait of how God reacts when, despite being confused, we choose to return. Have you ever felt this way? As if your prayers didn't reach the ceiling? As if no matter how hard you tried, your connection with God was lost? As if your mind is in 1,000 places, but none of them are at peace? Maybe you think you need to be better to come back, that you need to feel more faith, more regret, more something. But this story shows us the opposite. The return begins with movement, even disoriented, even scared, even without understanding everything. The rest of the soul begins when we stop running from God, and even hesitantly, we begin to walk back. Not with perfect answers, but with an open heart. Jesus reveals to you that God is not waiting for you to resolve yourself to receive you. He just wants you to come back, and more. He sees you even when you are still far away, and he runs to meet you. This is the kind of love that doesn't require performance. It is the love that sends us away from confusion with a hug. That turns, "I'm not worthy," into "bring the best tunic," who is not offended by our spiritual tiredness but moves towards it. And maybe that's the message your heart needed to hear most today. You can be far away, yes. You may be confused, full of unanswered questions, with your mind in torment. But God sees you. He waits for you, and he is already moving toward you. Take a deep breath. Allow yourself to feel this truth. God doesn't want your performance. He wants your tired heart. And it is in this tiredness that he reveals something powerful. True rest doesn't begin when everything calms down. It starts when you decide to stop running away. If this message spoke to your heart, write in the comments, "Father, I'm coming back. Maybe your comment is exactly what someone else needs to read to find their way back too. But there is an even deeper moment, a silent pain that affects even those who walk on water. Because doubt can visit even the most daring, and when it comes, it can drown our faith. Get ready, because the story that comes next will change the way you understand trust in Jesus. What if, for a moment, you let the noise of guilt silence, only to hear the sound of the footsteps of someone who dared to believe and sank? The scene is almost surreal. Strong wind, rough sea, dark night, a boat shaken by the fury of the waves, hearts taken by fear. And outside, in the middle of the darkness, someone approaches, walking on the impossible. Pedro recognizes the voice. The same voice that called him from the shore. The same one who saw him before any miracle. If it's you, tell me to go. And Jesus said, come. This is the moment when faith explodes and fear gives way. Pedro gets out of the boat, set foot on the unknown. The water which once threatened now sustains. The impossible bends to the Master's voice. But all it took was a distraction, a look at the wind, a thought of doubt, and he began to sink. And at that moment, it is not the water that submerges him. It's the guilt. It's the I screwed up feeling. It's the inner voice that says, you didn't trust enough. How many of us have experienced exactly this? We try to believe. We take a step. We begin a new cycle, a new journey, even a new prayer. But then comes the doubt, the fear, the anxiety. The mind starts to create scenarios. What if it goes wrong? What if God doesn't hold me this time? Is he really with me? And at the slightest sign of instability, we sink. But what happens next will challenge everything you believe about failing in faith. Because at that moment when Peter begins to descend, Jesus does not give a sermon. He does not condemn. He doesn't step aside to let the lesson happen. He extends his hand immediately. Don't expect Pedro to deserve it. It does not require him to try one more time. It doesn't require explanations. He just extends his hand. This gesture changes everything. Because sometimes the biggest weight we carry is not fear of the future, but guilt about the past. It's our fault that we doubted. It's our fault that we fell. The guilt of having taken our eyes off Jesus. But Jesus reveals something powerful to you. He does not wait for perfection to act. He acts even when we sink. O you of little faith, why did you doubt? This phrase is not a cold rebuke. It is the lament of a heart that knows how much faith can sustain us and how much fear tries to drown us. It is not a pointing finger, but an invitation to trust. A reminder that no matter how many times you suspect, if your cry is sincere, his hand will always be extended. Have you ever felt this way? As if I had let God down by not trusting enough? Have you ever blamed yourself for feeling afraid, even after praying? Have you ever thought that your faith is too weak to deserve heaven's attention? Jesus knew that Peter would doubt, and yet he said, come. This means that the invitation does not depend on the strength of your faith, but on his faithfulness. Resting the mind begins when we stop trying to deserve Jesus' hand and simply accept that it is already extended, that it reaches us at the exact right time, that even when we sink, we are still within the reach of his grace. Take a deep breath. Allow yourself to imagine this scene. You, with the water up to your chest, your eyes full of fear, and then a firm, safe hand, full of mercy, pulling you up. This is God's answer to your doubt, not the removal, but approximation. And there is something even deeper here. Peter was not just saved from the water, he was saved from shame. Because even after he failed, Jesus took him back to the boat, in front of others, in front of those who didn't dare leave. And there, Peter saw that faith is not proven in the absence of falling, but in the willingness to rise when Jesus extends his hand. If this message spoke to your heart, comment, Jesus, reach me even when I sink. Maybe your comment will be a bridge for someone who is feeling suffocated by guilt today. And if you are still here, it is because there is something even stronger that Jesus wants to reveal. Because there are moments when neither faith, nor guilt, nor fear explain the weight we carry. There are pains that crush us inside, and even the Son of God in a dark garden felt it. What happens next will touch a part of your soul that you may not have known needed healing. The hand squeezed. The chest. Sweat flowed like blood. The anguish overflowed in silence, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. There, in the dark garden of Gethsemane, he was no longer the Messiah of miracles. It was the afflicted Son, curved, in agony, and, perhaps for the first time, completely vulnerable under the weight of what was to come. "My soul is deeply sad, in mortal sadness." That was not the phrase of a weak man. It was the outburst of God himself made flesh, feeling the most human pain of all, being on the verge of an emotional collapse, and even so, not giving up. This scene shatters the distant image we often have of Jesus, because at this moment, he is not multiplying bread nor calming storms. He's moaning, crying, tremendous, feeling the unbearable pressure of a mission that would cost everything. And here's the detail that can transform the way you see your own pain. Even though he is God, Jesus didn't go through this alone. He prayed. He withdrew to be with the Father. He sought refuge where his soul knew it would find rest, not in flight, but in presence. How many times faced with emotional fatigue have you felt weak because you couldn't continue? How many nights have you cried in silence believing that no one would understand the weight you carry? How many times have you blamed yourself for not being able to simply be strong? But what if I told you that what you were taught about suffering is incomplete? Because true relief doesn't come when we pretend to be okay. It comes when we recognize, as Jesus did, that the soul can indeed be sad until death. And it is in this dark place that Jesus reveals something that can heal more than 1,000 pieces of advice. There is no shame in feeling exhausted. It is not weakness to cry. It is not a sin to be afraid. The Savior himself allowed himself to feel, but he did something that changes everything. He did not isolate himself from the presence of God. He knelt on her, and there, in the place of pain, was where he found the strength to continue to the cross. Gethsemane is not the end. It is the beginning of victory. Can you see yourself in this scene? Can you imagine Jesus there, sweating blood, knowing that his disciples are sleeping and yet praying? He prayed 3 times, and in each one it was deeper. The pain did not disappear immediately, but rest came where the surrender was greatest. "If it is possible, take this cup away from me, but let your will be done." That's not just a nice phrase. It is the most sincere prayer anyone has ever prayed. It is the surrender of someone who trusts in the Father's love even when suffering seems invincible. Maybe you are in your own Gethsemane right now, overloaded, confused, no energy to go on. And perhaps, like the disciples, you are too tired even to pray. But here's the secret. Rest doesn't come when everything is resolved. It begins the moment you surrender, even though you are tired, even weak, even without understanding. And Jesus is there, not as someone who watches you from afar, but as someone who has been in that same place. He knows the weight, he knows the taste of despair, and he is telling you now, rest in me, I am here. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself in that garden, the smell of wet earth, the cold of the night, and a voice whispering in the dark. I cried here too. This changes everything. Because when you understand that even Jesus needed to rest in the presence of the Father, your mind stops fighting alone and start to rest, not in the absence of suffering, but rest assured that you are not alone. If this message spoke to your soul, write in the comments, "Lord, even though I am tired, I rest in you." You have no idea how much of an answer your comment could be for someone who is also struggling in silence. Don't keep it just for yourself. Share this truth. The fear that consumes us emotionally is fueled by the unknown of tomorrow. And what comes next will change the way you look at the future. Because there is a way to live today with so much confidence that tomorrow stops being a threat. Brace yourself. What you're about to discover will challenge the root of your anxiety. It is in the silence of the desert that anxiety screams loudest. The dry ground beneath your feet, the unbearable heat burning your shoulders, and the constant echo of one thought. What about tomorrow? What if there is no more provision? What if God forgets me along the way? This is how the people of Israel walked, recently freed from Egypt, but still enslaved by a different type of oppressor, fear of the future. It was no longer the Pharaoh who paralyzed them. It was the uncertainty of the next day, a type of prison that does not use chains on the feet, but doubts in the mind. They had seen the sea part, the sky fill with fire and cloud, but even so, when the stomach complained and the routine turned to hunger, the heart forgot. The question was no longer who is God, but will he come again? And it is in this desperate scenario that heaven responds with something unexpected. Bread, but not an ordinary bread. It was manna, something they had never seen before, falling like early morning dew, soft, silent, and enough. Exactly what everyone needed. Nothing more, nothing less. But there was one condition. It could not be saved for the next day. If they tried to store it, it would go bad. If they took more than necessary, it would rot. And here is the point that could turn the key in your mind. The miracle only lasted one day. This was not a divine logistics error. It was a living lesson in trust, because Jesus reveals to you that rest does not come when you have control of tomorrow, but when you learn to trust in today. How many times does your mind run faster than your steps? You wake up and before you're even grateful for the new day, you're already making mental calculations of what could go wrong. You try to predict, anticipate, control, but all this generates is exhaustion. Why live in the what if? It's walking with your eyes on the future and your heart tied to fear. It's like trying to carry tomorrow's manna with today's strength, and that rots the soul. God did not fail the people in the desert. For 40 years, manna fell every day, without fail. No interruptions, even when they murmured, even when they doubted. Because God's faithfulness does not depend on the constancy of your faith, but on the nature of his love. And if he took care of them in an arid desert, with no crops, no supermarkets, no plans, why wouldn't he take care of you now? Stop. For a moment, take a deep breath, and look around you. There is manna on the ground today. It may not be exactly what you wanted, but it's what you need. It may not seem grand, but it is supernatural. It can come in the form of a call, an opportunity, a word, or even this video. But it's there, and it's enough. Because God's voice doesn't shout about the future. It whispers in the present. Have you ever noticed how anxiety robs us of the presence of God? It drags us into a tomorrow that doesn't even exist yet and prevents us from hearing what he is saying now. But Jesus, when he taught his disciples to pray, did not say, "Give us this month's bread today." He said, "Give us this day our daily bread, enough for today, grace for today, the direction for today, peace for today." Maybe you are living in your own desert right now, feeling that the path is too uncertain, that the clouds are few and the heat is too much. But there is a secret hidden in this story, and few know this truth. The desert is not the end of the journey. It's where we learn to trust. It's where the restless mind learns to rest, not because everything has been resolved, but because enough has arrived. If this word spoke to you, write in the comments, "God, I trust in today's bread." Your comment could be exactly the encouragement someone needs to not give up in the middle of the desert. And if you think you still don't have the necessary discernment to recognize when God is speaking or when it's just your mind creating voices, get ready, because what you're about to discover will teach you how to distinguish the divine from the noise. There is a moment in the Bible that reveals the secret to hearing God's voice clearly, even without experience. And that revelation can change the way you connect with him forever. Have you ever asked yourself, was it really God who spoke to me? Or was it just me trying to convince myself? The doubt about distinguishing God's voice from our own mind is one of the most silent and most common anxieties of those who want to grow spiritually. Confusion arises when we pray. We wait for an answer, and the silence seems absolute. Or even worse, when we have impressions, signs, thoughts that seem divine, but then we wonder if it was just imagination, and fear sets in. What if I'm fooling myself? What if it's just my neediness talking? The Bible takes us through a seemingly ordinary night. A young man named Samuel, still inexperienced, still in training, lies down in the temple to sleep. The environment is sacred, but its heart is in learning. Suddenly, a voice calls out to him, "Samuel!" He gets up and runs to Eli, the priest. But Eli had not called him. This is repeated 3 times. 3 times Samuel hears God and thinks it is someone else. He confuses the divine voice with the human voice. And here is a precious detail. Even those who were called by God directly had difficulty recognizing his voice at first. This detail changes everything, because Jesus reveals to you that hearing the voice of God is not a mystical gift for a few. It is a sensitivity that develops with intimacy, with practice, with persistent listening. And the most beautiful thing is that God doesn't stop talking just because you didn't understand the first time. He calls again and again and again. He is patient with still immature ears, because heaven speaks with loving insistence, not condemnation. Have you ever been to Samuel's place, in which the mind questions everything the heart wants to believe? Ever feel like God might be trying to tell you something, but you're not sure? Have you ever deeply wanted to hear clearly, but found yourself surrounded by noise? The noise of doubt, of fear, of other people's expectations, of your own anxiety? So here is the key that Eli finally hands over to Samuel. If he calls you again, say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." This sentence seems simple, but it is a statement of total surrender. When you say this sincerely, you position your heart to listen, not doubt. And something supernatural happens when we stop looking for ready-made answers and start looking for relationships. The voice of God is not to be deciphered like a mysterious code, but to be recognized as that of a father who loves you. The restless mind will try to simulate the voice of God. The meat will try to imitate. But there is an unmistakable detail in his voice. It brings peace, even when confronting. She brings direction, even when she asks to wait. It brings rest, even when it challenges you to get out of the boat. The problem is not that you doubt. The problem is to stop looking. Samuel only heard clearly after he made himself available. And what God spoke to him after that changed the course of an entire generation. What if God has also been trying to speak to you for days or weeks or months, but your anxious mind hasn't allowed space to listen? What if the dreams, the conversations, the verses that keep repeating themselves are not a coincidence? What if what you call, "maybe it's all in my head," is actually a whisper from heaven trying to reach you? Take a deep breath, close your eyes for a moment, and say with your heart, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." Perhaps this is the most powerful sentence you can release today, because it activates spiritual listening. And more than that, she silences doubt with humility. Samuel listened, but it wasn't overnight that he became a prophet. He listened, tested, made mistakes, got things right, but never stopped positioning himself to listen. The secret is in constancy, not perfection. If this message spoke to you, comment with faith. "Speak, Lord. I am listening." It may be that your comment is exactly the confirmation that someone else needs to understand that they are not alone in this search. But there is a type of interference that completely blocks God's voice. It doesn't come from outside. It doesn't come from other people. It comes from within. These are the scenarios your mind creates when fear takes control. What follows will show you how to silence those inner voices so that God's voice finally has room to be heard clearly. And what you will hear can heal the root of your insecurity. There are prisons that don't have bars, but that prevent us from moving forward. They are made of thoughts, of assumptions, of negative possibilities that the mind repeats like a relentless echo. It's going to go wrong. You're not capable. You're going to get hurt again. It's not safe. And when fear takes control, faith becomes stifled, suffocated by a future that hasn't even arrived yet, but that has already paralyzed us. This is exactly what happened to the spies sent by Moses. They were called to see the promised land, but ended up trapped in a land that only existed within their own minds. The scene is intense. 12 men walk through the hills of Canaan. They observe the fields, harvest enormous fruits, confirm everything that God had promised. It's a good land, fertile, abundant, But when they return, 10 of them do not see the promise. They see giants. We are like grasshoppers in their eyes, and in our own. And here is one of the most painful statements in the entire Bible. They didn't say they were called grasshoppers. They felt that way. The problem was not on the ground. It was in the way they saw themselves. How many times have you identified with this? You look ahead and you can even see that God has something good in store. But soon after, your mind creates an invisible barrier. You think, but what if it's not for me? What if I fail? What if I'm deluding myself? Fear draws monsters where God planted promises, and this fear feeds on your past pain. Jesus reveals something crucial to you in this story. The way you see yourself can become more determining than what God said about you. 10 spies returned full of facts, but empty of faith. They saw reality with the eyes of the flesh, not with the eyes of the Spirit. And the result? An entire people was prevented from entering into the promise, not because God backed down, but because they didn't trust. But there were 2 men, Joshua and Caleb, who saw everything differently. They also saw the giants. They also knew the danger. But they said something radical. If the Lord is pleased with us, He will bring us into this land. In other words, it doesn't matter how big the enemy is, it matters who's on our side. They did not deny the fear. They chose not to submit to it. Have you ever stopped to think about how many decisions you failed to make because of scenarios that only existed inside your head? Have you ever found yourself avoiding people, places, dreams, just because your mind screamed louder than your faith? Fear doesn't need to be shouted to overcome us. It just needs to be constant. And when we feed these negative voices, we end up identifying more with the weakness than the promise. But there is a powerful revelation here. God does not require you to be blind to reality. He doesn't ask you to deny the pain or feign courage. What He wants is for you to choose to look at Him, even when the mind presents other versions of the story. God's voice will always push you forward. The voice of fear will always trap you in the past or in paralysis. The question is, which of the 2 are you feeding more? Perhaps today you are on the verge of an important decision, a new step, a fresh start, a conversation you postponed, a calling you feel but fear. And perhaps, like the spies, you even saw the fruit, but chose to focus on the giants. Jesus is inviting you to another way of seeing, a way that does not ignore the risks, but that believes in the loyalty of those who promise to support you. Take a deep breath. Imagine yourself in front of this land. You are there. The walls are high, but so is the sky. And the same God who opened the sea now says, "This land is yours, but you must believe my word more than your thoughts." If this message touched your heart, write in the comments, "Lord, I choose to trust even in fear." Your comment could free someone who is exactly where you are now, trapped inside their own mind. And here comes the most impressive part of this spiritual journey, because there are times when fear does not come from outside, but from one's own lack of inner peace, when not even silence brings relief, when even resting becomes difficult. What comes next will show you how Jesus calms not only the sea around you, but the storm within you. And it will change the way you close your eyes at night. There is a pain that no one sees, but that manifests itself every night. When the world outside becomes silent, and only you and your mind are left, that place where the storms scream loudest. It's when thoughts don't stop, scenarios repeat themselves, and the heart accelerates as if fleeing from something invisible. It is at this moment that many people try to sleep, but cannot rest. Because laying the body down is one thing, quieting the soul is another entirely. The Bible takes us inside a boat tossed by violent winds. It's night. The disciples are crossing the Sea of Galilee, and suddenly the storm takes them by surprise. The boat fills with water. Desperation takes over. But what makes this scene even more impressive is what Jesus is doing in the midst of the chaos. Sleeping. Yes, sleeping. In peace, unshakable. While the disciples run, scream, and think they are going to die, Jesus is in deep rest, fully trusting in the Father. This image says a lot, because maybe you see yourself like these disciples, surrounded by winds you don't control, Financial problems, family conflicts, medical diagnoses, old fears that are recycled in the early hours of the morning. And then you ask yourself, where is God? How can he be so calm while my life seems to be sinking? But Jesus reveals to you here one of the most liberating truths. The fact that Jesus is silent does not mean that he has forgotten you. It means he is in control. At the height of their despair, the disciples finally wake him up and shout, "Master, do you not care if we perish?" And then Jesus stands up, "Speak to the wind," and with authority he commands, "Silence, calm down." And instantly the sea calms down, the sky opens, and peace returns. But here's the detail that many overlook. Jesus doesn't just calm the outer sea, he confronts the inner storm. He looks the disciples in the eyes and asks, "Why are you still afraid? Where is your faith?" This question crosses time and reaches the soul of whoever hears it. Because sometimes the real storm isn't the one outside, it's the one inside. The anxiety that tightens your chest, the guilt that suffocates, the feeling of powerlessness in the face of the unknown. But what if I told you that the same voice that ordered peace to the sea wants to order peace to your heart right now? You've tried to control your thoughts with logic. You've tried to ignore your fear. You've tried to distract yourself, but nothing has worked. Because the soul does not respond to what is rational, it responds to what is eternal. And the voice of Jesus has this power to transform chaos into calm with a single word: silence. He doesn't need arguments. He just needs you to listen and believe. Close your eyes now for a moment. Imagine yourself inside that boat. Feel the wind, see the water coming in, and then see Jesus standing up. He looks at the storm and then at you, and he says, "Fear not, I am here." Take a deep breath. Feel his presence. Allow this scene to repeat itself during your sleepless nights, because the peace that Jesus offers does not depend on the absence of problems. It is born from his presence. Maybe you're so used to sleeping worried that you've forgotten what it's like to lie down in peace. But today, Jesus wants to restore that. You want to train your mind to trust, to rest, to turn off the cycle of toxic thoughts, and simply rest in him. If this word spoke to you, write in the comments with faith, "Jesus, calm my storm." Your comment could be the turning point for someone who, like you, desperately needs a touch of peace. But there are still times when, even though we pray with tears and hope for a miracle, everything seems stagnant, as if the sky was closed, as if God were in absolute silence. What comes next will reveal a hidden truth about those moments when nothing changes, and why that is precisely when he works most. And what you will discover will change the way you deal with waiting periods. Pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes, she whispered, so silently that the world doesn't notice. But inside the soul, it's a constant lament, a weight that grows every night when prayer seems to have no answer. Have you ever been to this place? Where do you pray, but nothing changes? Where do you wonder if you are talking to the ceiling? Where bending the knee seems more like a tired repetition than an encounter with God? That was exactly how Anna felt. Year after year, she went up to the temple, and year after year, he returned with empty arms. She wanted a son, but more than that, she wanted to be heard by God, be seen, felt, perceived, because her pain wasn't just physical. It was emotional, it was social, it was spiritual. And this is something that many people experience today. You pray, cry, and everything remains the same. And then a question arises that many do not have the courage to ask out loud. Is God really listening? The Bible says that Hannah prayed with a bitter soul. This goes beyond memorized words. It was a raw prayer, no filters, full of pain and vulnerability. She didn't give speeches. She didn't impress anyone. She simply poured out what was inside her, even if it wasn't beautiful, nor theologically perfect. And it was at this level of truth that something began to move, even without external signs. Have you ever felt like Anna? In a place where everyone seems to receive blessings while your life seems stagnant? Have you ever compared yourself to people who don't pray that much but seem to thrive? This hurts. This is tiring. This is discouraging. But here is what Jesus reveals to you. The prayer that is born from sincere pain is not ignored by heaven. It is processed in silence. And while it seems like nothing is happening, God is preparing something bigger than you imagine. Anna's prayer was not immediately answered, but something invisible was released into the spiritual world. And this waiting, this anguish, this silence was shaping not only the response, but Anna herself. Prayer didn't change God. It changed her. It made her more dependent, more intimate, more sensitive. And at the right time, God not only responded, He surprised her. Because the son she received, Samuel, was not just a son. He was a prophet, an instrument of God for an entire generation. Maybe you're like Anna, thinking your story is about lonely pain. But what if I told you that your process is generating something that will impact other lives? That your suffering today can give shape to a much greater calling tomorrow? That God is not silent? Is He engineering a response that goes beyond what you asked for? Jesus reveals something powerful to you. Heaven does not ignore what the mouth cannot say. Tears are liquid prayers, and what you call delay, heaven calls preparation. Sincere prayer, even if done in silence, even if it seems forgotten, even if it is shy, moves the heart of God. So don't stop. Keep searching, even without understanding, even without seeing it, even when everything seems the same. Because in the invisible, God is sowing a purpose. And when the time comes, it will be impossible to deny that it was He who responded. If this message spoke to your heart, declare in the comments. Even without seeing it, I continue to believe. Your comment could be the silent encouragement someone in despair needs to read today. Yes, your pain can be a bridge to someone's healing. Don't keep to yourself what heaven wants to use to touch other souls. But there is still a pain that goes beyond God's silence. It is the one that settles inside the anxious mind, that wants to believe, but lives hostage to fear. What comes next will confront everything you've been taught about faith and doubt. And what you're about to discover, it will change the way you view anxiety and your relationship with Jesus. What if God's silence is not the most painful? What if the real battle is within the mind, when it becomes a battleground between faith and fear? There is a type of pain that consumes you from within. It is spiritual anxiety, a knot in the soul that tightens even when faith tries to flourish. And that's exactly where the next story will touch your heart, in a way you perhaps never imagined. Thomas's mind was filled with conflict. Everyone talked about the resurrection. Everyone said they had seen the living Christ. But him? He couldn't believe it. Not out of rebellion, but out of fear. Fear of being disappointed. Fear of appearing weak. Fear of being deluded. And it is this type of struggle that often haunts those who, like you, want to rest in God, but face an anxiety that contaminates even moments of prayer. Thomas didn't just want to hear that Jesus was alive. He wanted to play, see, feel, confirm. Not because I didn't love Jesus, but precisely because I loved Jesus so much that I couldn't bear the possibility of having believed in vain. He was injured, confused, exhausted. His anxiety was real, human, palpable, and maybe you can relate with that nagging thought that says, what if none of this is true? What if God is far away? What if I'm praying into the void? Many people carry the same anguish as Thomas, but in silence, because they are ashamed to doubt, because they think that having faith means never questioning. But Jesus reveals something surprising to you. Christ Himself did not reject Thomas because of his doubt. On the contrary, He came to him. Jesus appeared directly to those who were anxious, full of fear, lost between the desire to believe and the weight of insecurity. And the most impactful, Jesus did not give a sermon. He didn't humiliate Thomas. He just reached out His hand and said, touch. In other words, I see your struggle and I will not abandon you because of it. It was an invitation, intimate, gentle, transformative. And it is this same invitation that Jesus makes today to you who feel your faith threatened by anxiety. He does not demand spiritual perfection. He just wants you not to run away. Anxiety is often not a lack of faith. but an excess of worry that tries to take control. It's the fear of giving yourself completely and being left in the dark. But what if I told you that Jesus wants to enter this darkness with you? That He is not waiting for you to resolve your anxiety before approaching? That He is already present even in the chaos of your accelerated thinking? Jesus knew that Thomas was vulnerable, but He didn't leave him out because of that. He knew his heart was sincere yet fearful, and maybe that's your truth too. You believe, but there are days when you can't feel it. You pray, but the restlessness doesn't go away. You read the Word, but your mind is so noisy you can barely hear God's voice. And here's the key point. Jesus doesn't require you to be calm to talk to Him. He steps into the middle of your chaos and says, "I'm here." Peace does not come from the absence of anxiety. It is born from the presence of Jesus in the midst of anxiety. This is why the verse in John 20:29 is not a rebuke, but a promise. Blessed are they who have not seen and yet have believed. In other words, happy are those who, even with fear, even with an agitated mind, even without visible signs, still choose to believe. Not because faith is strong, but because grace is greater than any doubt. And you? Have you ever felt like Tomei? Have you ever blamed yourself for not being able to believe with the same intensity as others? Have you ever thought that your place at Jesus' table was threatened because of your uncertainties? So know this now. Doubt does not disqualify you. An anxious heart does not cancel God's love. And the conflicted mind is still a place where Jesus wants to dwell. If this message touched your heart, comment, "Even anxious, I choose to trust." Your comment could be the relief another restless soul seeks. Don't underestimate the power of a vulnerable public confession. It can be the first step for someone who has hidden for fear of appearing too weak for faith. But don't stop now, because what comes next will touch something even deeper, that bitter feeling that God is too far away. Get ready, because the next story will reveal a truth that could free your heart from one of the enemy's most dangerous lies. What you are about to discover will change the way you perceive the absence of God. But what happens when anxiety gives way to emptiness? When the soul becomes silent, not because of peace, but because of absence? There is an even more subtle, silent pain, that feeling that God has moved away, that He is distant, inaccessible, unreachable. And if you've ever felt this, get ready. Because the following story will touch the depths of your pain with a revelation that can transform the way you hear God, even when everything seems too dark to hear. Job didn't just lose his children, his health, and his stability. He lost the sense of God's presence. In the midst of grief, pain, public shame, and a wounded body, he looked for the voice of God, and all he heard was silence. He cried, shouted, begged, but no answer. And maybe that's the hidden scream inside. You. Not the scream of those who stopped believing, but the scream of those who still believe. And even then, they can no longer feel. If I go east, He is not there. If I go west, I cannot find Him. Job 23:8. That was Job's confession. And how many of us have gone through this spiritual labyrinth where we look for signs, feel the absence, and conclude, God has distanced Himself from me? It is at this time that faith begins to get sick, because what hurts is not just the pain of life, but the feeling that we are facing everything alone. But there is a verse in Job that cuts through this despair like a sword of light. He knows the way I go. Job 23:10. Do you understand the weight of this? Job didn't see God, he didn't feel Him, he didn't hear Him, but somewhere deep within the broken soul, there was a spark of trust. Even if I don't realize it, He knows exactly where I am. This is not denying the pain. It's about trusting it. It is recognizing that felt absence does not mean real abandonment. Jesus reveals to you that there are moments when God's silence is, in fact, the sound of a greater purpose being built. There are seasons when God hides, not out of punishment, but because He is preparing you for something that can only be born in the dark. It was in silence that Job was stoned. It was in his absence that his faith took root, because real faith is not believing when everything is fine. Real faith is continuing even when God's presence seems to have disappeared. And here is a truth that will confront what you have been taught. Feeling God is not the same as being close to Him, because the presence of God does not depend on your emotional perception. She is constant, unshakable. Even when you don't feel it, it's there. It's like the sun behind the clouds, invisible to the eye but never absent. How many times have you prayed sincerely and left with an even emptier soul? How many times have you read the Bible expecting relief and all you felt was nothing? This does not mean that God has rejected you. It just means that He is calling you to a maturity of faith that goes beyond feeling, a faith that rests in the conviction that He is present, even in the dark. Job had no comforting promises. He didn't hear the "it's going to be okay" that we so often hoped for, face the void. But his statement was powerful. He knows. And that, God knows. He knows your pain, your tiredness, your confusion. You know your effort to continue even when everything in you screams to give up. And that's why He didn't leave you. You don't need to understand to trust. You don't need to feel to rest. Because Jesus reveals to you that true rest does not come from immediate answers, but from a trust that survives silence. Maybe today you are like Job, silent on the inside, trying to be strong on the outside. But allow yourself to be fragile, in the presence of the one who supports you even when you don't realize Him. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and listen with your soul. God is guiding you even now. He didn't lose you in the midst of your pain. He is in control of the path, even when you don't see the footprints. If this word touched your soul, comment now. Even without feeling it, I trust in you. Your comment can reach another heart that, in silence, also feels God distant. A simple act of declared faith can open up space for healing. Not just yours, but that of someone who is on the verge of giving up. And here comes something even deeper. Because if feeling God distant is already difficult, imagine when the body is too tired to even rest. The next block will reveal a journey of pain and surrender where peace did not come by force, but by a psalm written between persecutions, escapes, and sleepless nights. What you're about to hear will change the way you rest, even in the midst of chaos. But what happens when the mind refuses to silence even after so many prayers? When your heart wants to rest, but your thoughts keep pounding like thunder in the early hours of the morning? There is a type of exhaustion that you don't see in the mirror, but it weighs like tons inside. And it is at this point that many, like David, learn that true rest does not begin in the body. It begins in the soul. What you are about to discover will change the way you understand rest in God. Imagine yourself running for your life. Someone you love, someone from within your own home, has risen up to destroy everything you have built. Friends abandoned you. People betrayed you. His name has been tarnished. And in the middle of it all, you are in the desert, exhausted, afraid, homeless, no control. This was David's reality when he wrote Psalm 3. He was not in a palace. He was on the floor, literally. And yet, in the midst of this avalanche of pain, David writes something that seems impossible. I lie down and sleep in peace. How can anyone rest when their mind is at war? How can anyone sleep when their soul is on constant alert, as if danger is lurking, ready to attack? Maybe you understand this feeling. Maybe your mind is like that now. You try to turn it off, but your head insists on going through all the possibilities, all conversations, all the what-ifs, and even lying down, you don't rest. You just close your eyes and wait for sleep to overcome the mental chaos. But Jesus reveals to you that true rest does not come from the absence of problems, but from the certainty of God's presence even in the midst of chaos. David didn't sleep because everything was resolved. He slept because he trusted that even without control, God was watching. And that's the key. Learning to let go of the control that was never yours. The mind only finds peace when it rests in the arms of those who have the power to support it. Because deep down, what stops us from resting isn't problems. It's the fear that no one is taking care of them. David declared, I arise, for the Lord sustains me. He understood something that many still struggle to accept, that rest is a spiritual choice before it is an emotional condition. It's not about numbing the pain or ignoring reality, but about trusting in the God who doesn't sleep. The same God who sustained David on that night of despair wants to sustain you now. And maybe you're asking yourself, but how do I trust? How do I release this weight from my mind? The answer is in the psalm itself. David surrendered his fears, his enemies, his failures, everything. He prayed with brutal honesty, not with beautiful formulas, but with words torn from the soul. He would lay his thoughts at the feet of God and say, "Now, take care." Jesus reveals to you that this is exactly what he wants from you. May you sincerely say, "Lord, I can't handle it, but I know you can." And in this act of surrender, rest begins. Not because the problems disappeared, but because your heart stopped fighting alone. Have you ever tried to rest with your soul armed? Have you ever tried to sleep with your heart in survival mode? It's impossible, because the body only rests when the soul believes it is safe. And security in this unstable world is only found in the God who is immutable. That's why David was able to sleep even though he was running away, because he knew he wasn't running away alone. Today, perhaps your escape is not from an army, but from thoughts, of memories, from wounds, from trauma. And even if everything is silent around you, inside you, the war continues. But what if I told you that what you were taught about rest is incomplete? That rest doesn't begin with pillows, but with promises. That true sleep doesn't come from tranquilizers, but from trust? This psalm is more than poetry. It is a spiritual strategy. It's a reminder that you can lie down and sleep and wake up, because the God who keeps you doesn't sleep, doesn't look away, doesn't lose sight of you. Even on days when everything in you is tired, he remains attentive, vigilant, gift. And if this message is reaching your heart right now, stop for a moment, take a deep breath, close your eyes, and say in a low voice, "Jesus, take care of my mind," because there is no rest outside of him. There is no healing outside of presence. And there is no greater peace than knowing that even if you turn it off, he continues to take care of everything. If this word touched your tired soul, comment now, "Jesus, take care of my mind." Maybe your comment is exactly what someone needs to believe that they too can rest. You have no idea how many lives are on the brink of mental collapse, and a simple sentence of faith can rekindle someone's hope. And here comes something even more surprising. Because if resting in the middle of your flight is already challenging, imagine when you start to doubt whether God still wants to talk to you. What if the next block showed you that God doesn't wait for perfection to speak? He just waits for a, "Here I am." What comes next will touch the places where you thought you were too spiritual to doubt, but too human to deserve hearing. There is a doubt that, when it sets in, paralyzes the soul. What if God doesn't want to talk to me? This silent thought, often ignored, is what gnaws the most inside. Not because God has been silent, but because the heart no longer feels worthy of listening. What you are about to discover now will change the way you understand who can truly hear God's voice. And maybe you'll never see yourself the same way again. Silence hurts more when it is preceded by an expectation. And for many, prayer has become a failed attempt to reach a God who seems to respond to others, except you. You even pray, wait, read, but doubt creeps in. Does God speak to me? Or does he only speak to the saints, the spiritual, the chosen? This feeling is not new. Moses also went through this, and this is what almost no one says about his calling. Moses was not a hero when he heard the voice of God. He was a fugitive, a killer, a man broken inside, hidden in a strange land, tending sheep that weren't even his. In the eyes of the world, Moses had lost his purpose, but Jesus reveals something that transforms everything. God does not speak to those who think they are ready. He talks to whoever is available. The burning bush appeared in the middle of the desert, not in a temple, not on an altar, but in the middle of nowhere. That already tells you a lot. God doesn't wait for you to be in the right place externally. He looks for the right heart internally. When Moses sees the bush that was burning without being consumed, something inside him moved. And then he hears the voice. But understand, God's voice only manifests itself when Moses approaches. He could have ignored it. I could have moved on. But no, he chose to approach what didn't make sense. And there, he heard something that would change everything. "Moses! Moses! Here I am." Two simple words. No theology, no big promises, availability only. And it was enough for God to open the heavens and reveal a mission that would transform the history of an entire people. This shows you that hearing God's voice is not about perfection. It has to do with presence, with delivery, with the courage to say, I'm here even though I'm scared, even though I'm hurt, even though I don't understand. How many times have you felt like you're not spiritual enough? That your old mistakes still echo when you try to pray? That your restless mind is an obstacle to the supernatural? But what if I told you that what you learned about being prepared to hear from God is incomplete? God does not demand your perfection. He just waits for your attention. The moment you, like Moses, say, "Here I am," something opens up in the spiritual world. You recognize that you don't have the answers, who doesn't know the way, but trust in the one who has. And this trust opens space for God to speak, not through thunder or earthquakes, but often through a whisper in the spirit, a sudden peace, an unexpected direction, because Jesus reveals it to you. God's voice does not need to be loud, it just needs to be heard with the right heart. And maybe now you're scared, fear of getting closer, to be disappointed, to hear the silence again. But what if this silence is not absence? What if it's expectation? Because there are times when God remains silent, so that your search becomes more sincere. He wants your attention, not just your orders, not just your tears. He wants your, "Here I am." Moses did not know what was coming. He only knew that God was there. And maybe that's all you need now, to recognize that, even with your past, even with your failures, even with the fear that still pulses, God still wants to talk to you. Have you ever asked yourself if you are ready to hear from God? The truth is, no one is. But the good news is that He speaks anyway. Because the voice of God is not a prize for the strong. It's a relief for the tired. It is a direction for the lost. It is a response to those who feel ignored. And maybe that's your prayer right now. God, I don't know if I deserve to hear you, but I do. If so, know that this is the exact moment in which He approaches the bush of your life and calls you by name. If this word resonated with you, write in the comments, "Here I am, Lord." Your comment could be the push of faith someone is waiting for to approach God without fear. Sometimes a "Here I am" post from you can rekindle another's flagging spirit. And if you thought you weren't worthy of hearing God's voice, wait until you meet someone who, even without being sought out by anyone, was seen by Jesus on top of a tree and had his entire story turned upside down in seconds. What comes now will challenge every thought of worthlessness you have ever believed about yourself. Get ready, because Jesus reveals to you that there are places where no one sees you, but He does. And when the pain is not in the silence of God, but in the echo of the voices you have heard your whole life, when you can't believe that God can speak to you because you believe you don't have enough value to be noticed by Him, what if the root of your spiritual blockage is deeper than just not knowing how to pray, and is hidden in the way you see yourself? What you hear now will change how you see yourself, and how you believe God sees you. He was too short to be noticed, and too hated to be loved. The city knew Him only by the label: publican, burglar, sold to the empire, a man who had traded faith for status, devotion to money, the soul for control. But Jesus reveals to you, even the one that everyone ignores, could be the chosen one to receive a visit from heaven. Zacchaeus knew who he was in the eyes of the people. He knew he wouldn't be welcome in temples, that no one would make room for him in a crowd that wanted to hear Jesus. But something burned inside him, a restlessness that not all the gold from the collectorate could calm, something that his mind tried to ignore, but his soul could no longer silence it. He wanted to see Jesus, just that. Not a miracle, not a cure, just see. Like someone, even from afar, wants to be sure that God still exists, and that maybe, just maybe, He still cares about someone like you. But Zacchaeus was short, and the crowd was loud, and the space was tight. Like many who today feel this way, too small spiritually, pressured by religious demands, surrounded by voices that say, "You are not worthy." But then comes the first wow moment of this story. An unexpected gesture, unusual, even childish. Zacchaeus climbs a tree. A businessman, rich, influential, exposing yourself to ridicule. Do you know why? Because the thirst to see Jesus was greater than the fear of looking foolish. The thirst to be noticed by God spoke louder than the judgment of men, and that changes everything. The crowd may not have even noticed him up there, but Jesus, yes, he stops, look up, and he calls, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, because today I need to be at your house." Can you feel the weight of this sentence? Jesus didn't say, "I want to heal you." Not even, "I want to teach you." He said, "I need to be with you." It's as if saying, "I know where you are. I know what you did. I know what they think of you. But today, it's you I want to be with." What if this was the answer to the pain of those who feel spiritually useless, knowing that Jesus doesn't call you by perfection, but by name, that he does not look for the holiest of the crowd, but what else is hidden, that he looks up when everyone looks down, that he sees value where the world only sees failure? Zacchaeus didn't ask for anything, and Jesus offered everything. And this is the great spiritual twist. Whoever the world discarded was chosen to be visited, not because of merit, but for grace. How many times have you felt like you don't have a calling? Who doesn't have gifts? That your faith is weak, your life is too messy, your past is too heavy. But what if I told you that the biggest lie you've been told is that you need to be someone special to hear God? Jesus reveals it to you. You just need to be where he can find you. Zacchaeus climbed a tree. You can take a step of faith. It can open your heart. You can say, "Lord, I don't know what to do, but I'm here." And if you do, he will stop everything. It will look at you, and he will say, "Today, I need to be with you." Because this is the voice that many have never heard. The voice that doesn't judge. The voice that doesn't accuse. The voice that does not demand performance, but invites presence. And maybe, like Zacchaeus, you feel like you're up in a tree right now, observing from afar, hoping God will see, but afraid to come down. Fear that grace is not for you. But there is something only you can do. Allow yourself to be seen, because he has already called you. Now, it's up to you to get off. If this message touched you, write in the comments, "Jesus, I come down from the tree." Declare that you no longer want to observe from afar, that the time has come to be visited by God in your home, in your life, in your heart. Your comment could be the awakening of another soul who has also been hiding for a long time. And remember, even if you don't see space in the crowd, there is a place reserved for you on the tree of grace, and Jesus' gaze is right there. And when the weight is not in the past that we live in, but in what we can no longer do, when the pain is not in what God has not yet said, but in the feeling that we have lost even the ability to speak to him, what if the most deafening silence is that of the soul itself, which can no longer pray as before? What you're about to hear will change the way you view prayer, and it will remind you that to be heard by Jesus, you don't need to know how to start. You just need to dare to cry out. The city didn't stop. The footsteps mingled with the murmur of the crowd that followed Jesus through the streets of Jericho. Everyone was passing through, but he was still. Not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. Bartimaeus saw nothing. He was blind. And blindness wasn't just physical. It was also symbolic. He didn't see God. I didn't see the purpose. I didn't see the point. Like many today who, although with open eyes, feel spiritually lost, without direction, and without more words. He was begging by the roadside. What for many was just a social detail, for Jesus was a spiritual portrait. A man used to asking, but who no longer knew if anyone really listened. How many times have you also prayed like this, sitting on the sidelines of faith, waiting for something to change, but not knowing if you still know how to pray like you used to? Like when you said beautiful words, flowed in praise, felt heaven respond. And today, all that comes out of your mouth is, "Lord, have mercy." That's exactly what Bartimaeus said. Nothing fancy, no far-fetched phrases, no theology, no praises sung, just a desperate cry, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." He did not ask for an elaborate cure. He made no promises. He just cried out, and that was enough to stop Jesus. This is the first wow of this block. Jesus stops. In the middle of the crowd, in the middle of the agenda, in the middle of the noise, he hears a cry that no one respected. Because, yes, when Bartimaeus shouted, many told him to shut up. They said it was inconvenient, uncomfortable, too noisy. Have you ever felt this way? As if your pain were spiritual drama? As if your sincere prayer was immature? As if your request, in the eyes of others, was not worthy of God's attention? But Jesus reveals it to you. Sincerity always reaches heaven. And what man despises, God listens to with affection. Jesus turns around, "Call Bartimaeus," and here comes the twist that few realize. He asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" Seems obvious, doesn't it? A blind man wants to see, but Jesus wants to hear it from his mouth, because there is something powerful about verbalizing what the soul feels. When you name your pain, you're not just talking, you're taking a step toward healing. Bartimaeus doesn't hide it. He says, "Lord, may I see?" And Jesus responds with something even more profound. "Go, your faith has made you well." Understand, faith was not in the beauty of words, but in the boldness of crying out, in the courage not to remain silent, in raw, torn, imperfect, but real faith. And that changes everything. Many today remain silent because they believe they don't know how to pray, that God will not listen to disconnected words. They need specific vocabulary, structure, preparation. But Jesus does not seek eloquence. He responds to the heart. And if Bartimaeus teaches you anything, it's that a prayer without form, but with truth, has more power than 1,000 rehearsed phrases. Have you ever been to this place? Of simply not knowing what to say to God? Of feeling like your mind is blocked? That your tears speak more than your words? That all you can say is, "Lord, help me"? Well, no, this is enough. Jesus reveals to you that the Holy Spirit intercedes even for the groans that we cannot express. Romans 8:26. In other words, even the silence of your pain becomes a prayer in the Father's ears. And if it embarrasses you, if it relieves you, then you've already started praying again. Because true prayer begins when you stop pretending and start being. Be vulnerable, be small, be dependent, being a son. Bartimaeus got up and went to Jesus. The Bible says he cast off his cloak. This is another powerful moment. The cape was his sign of identity. It showed that he was a beggar, a blind man, an outcast. But he throws off the cloak even before receiving the cure. Why? Because he already believed that something would change. He could already see himself standing, even when he was still blind. This is the prayer that changes everything. The one that is born from faith even before the answer. The one that says, "Lord, I'm here, hear me." And that's enough for the sky to move. If this message spoke to your soul, comment now, "Jesus, hear me." Just like that. Like Bartimaeus. No need to explain. Just declare. This comment could be your spiritual cry. And perhaps, without realizing it, you are throwing away your cover now. But what if the biggest emptiness doesn't come from the lack of response, but from the feeling of abandonment? What if the quietest pain is the feeling that God has forgotten you completely? When the days pass, prayers seem to disappear in the wind, and the heart wonders, "Does he still remember me?" What you are about to discover will confront that question with a truth that can heal your entire spirit. The ark swayed gently over the waters. The rain had already stopped. The sky was calm, but hope seemed to have evaporated with the last ray of sun. Noah looked outside and saw only immensity. Water everywhere. No sign of land. No voice. No direction. Just silence. A heavy silence. Prolonged. Painful. How many days had passed since God last spoke to him? Have you ever felt this? As if you were trapped in an emotional ark? You know you obeyed. You know you trusted. You know you followed every detail of divine instructions. But now, silence, and the world around us seems flooded with uncertainty. You wait, and nothing changes. No signal, no response, no confirmation. Just the echo of doubt itself. That was Noah's place. For months, he fluctuated between, "I've heard the voice of God," and "Is he still with me?" The Bible does not record any words from the Lord during this time, just the grim record of deluge and isolation. The same isolation that many feel today in their emotional struggles, in your broken relationships, in the anxiety that doesn't give way, in the fear that suffocates, in the void of the soul. But then comes a sentence, a line that changes everything. Genesis 8:1 says, "Then God remembered Noah." And here is one of the greatest spiritual secrets that many are unaware of. God never forgot. God's remembering is not like our remembering. It's not that he was distracted. It's not that he forgot. The time has come to act. Jesus reveals to you that God's time is not like ours. While you think you are forgotten, he is organizing waters, preparing dry land, repositioning the heavens. His silence is not abandonment. It's orchestration. It is wisdom. It's love. God's remembering is the announcement of the next step. It's the turning of the page. It's the moment when heaven decides it's time to take you out of the ark and place you in the new one. But for Noah, this new thing required waiting, patience, trust, faith that continues even when there are no more signs. And perhaps that is your calling today. Trust when it seems like God has forgotten, praying when it seems like no one answers, stay when everything says to give up. Because remembering God is not a coincidence. It is a certainty. It is a commitment to who he is, and he is faithful. Imagine the scene. Noah, surrounded by animals, family, wooden walls, and a closed sky. He could have doubted himself. He could have questioned his faith. I might have thought something went wrong. How many times have you felt this way? As if you were adrift, aimless, without an emotional anchor. As if all the effort, all the faith, all the dedication had been in vain. But listen to this. There is only silence in heaven when preparation is underway. When God is organizing a new time, he first quiets everything around, and what seems like forgetfulness is planning. You know what's even more powerful? The Bible says that when God remembered Noah, he began to make the waters subside. It didn't happen overnight, but something invisible started to happen. The wind blew. The level began to recede, and slowly, the promise began to emerge. Perhaps what you need now is not a shout of victory, but a whisper of assurance. God is remembering you in the midst of pain, in the middle of waiting, in the midst of fear. He hasn't forgotten you. He is just preparing the ground for you to walk on after the storm. Then you take a deep breath. You allow yourself to feel that word. It's not just an old story. It's your story being written now, and if your soul is exhausted from waiting, cry out in silence, because Jesus reveals to you, waiting is not punishment, it is care. And if this message made your heart beat differently, comment with faith, "Jesus, remember me." This simple act can break the spiritual silence of someone who will read your comment and feel remembered too, because God uses even a comment as a seed of hope, and when God promises and delays, when you hold a promise in your heart, but time seems to mock your faith, waiting can be one of the quietest and cruelest pains of the spiritual journey. And what you're about to discover will change the way you see God's timing and how to rest your mind even when everything says it's too late. Abraham was old, Sarah, his wife, even more so. Their bodies were already screaming the end, but there was something that still burned inside, a promise. A word that came from God and said that a son would come. But the years passed, the wrinkles increased, the hair turned white, and the belly remained empty. Time passed like a cold shadow over their dreams, and the inevitable question invaded their hearts. Has God forgotten what he promised? Have you ever waited for something like this? Something that God placed in your heart, but that seems increasingly distant from reality? A restoration, a calling, a cure, an answer. And the more you pray, the more the clock seems to laugh at your faith. You try to keep hope alive, but inside, tiredness eats away at your mind, as if each day of silence were a sentence. This is where many give up, not because they no longer believe, but because they are exhausted from waiting. But Jesus reveals to you that waiting is not a divine failure. It's a silent preparation. When Genesis 21:1 states, "The Lord visited Sarah as he promised," something profound is being said. God does not ignore time. He redeems time. He doesn't respond when we want, but always at the exact moment when everything needs to happen. And yes, sometimes that moment is after all human hope has died. There is something transformative about realizing that waiting is not a punishment. It is a test of trust. Because God does not move by our calendar, He moves by faith that perseveres in silence. Abraham waited. He cried. He fought against doubt, but he never released his promise. And it was in this space between "it has already been said" and "it has not yet happened" that faith was trained, honed, strengthened. The mind that rests in God learns that His silence is not rejection. It is strategy. It is in this interval that He shapes us. And often, what needs to mature most is not the miracle. It is the heart that will receive it. Because a miracle not at the right time can become a burden. But at the right time, it becomes a testimony. Imagine Sarah silently laughing when she heard she was going to have a son. The Bible says she laughed, not in joy, but in disbelief, as if to say, "Now? After everything?" But it was precisely there at a time when natural hope was already dead that God decided to act, because He loves to show that nothing is impossible when He is the author of the promise. Now look at your life. How many times has your soul laughed in disbelief disguised as conformity? How many times have you said to yourself, "I don't think it was for me"? Maybe today is the day that heaven is telling you, it still is, and it's coming. Jesus reveals to you that rest of the mind does not come from waiting for it to end, but from trusting that even without visible answers, the plan is active. Silence is not a vacuum. It is sacred. It is there that God writes the lines that your eyes cannot yet read, and when the time comes, everything will make sense. But until then, He trains you, "Get ready," and whispers, "Trust. I haven't forgotten." If this message spoke deeply to your heart, comment with faith, "Lord, teach me to wait and rest." Your comment could be an anchor for someone who is about to give up on a promise today. And if that word touched you, press the like button. You have no idea how much this small gesture can make this truth reach someone who is struggling not to sink into the despair of waiting. But what about when all you still have is almost nothing? When your faith, already bruised, seems too small to even be noticed by God? What if I told you that it was at that exact moment that Jesus revealed something that could turn everything upside down and finally free your mind from guilt, comparison, and the weight of not being enough? Prepare your heart. It will confront you, but it will heal you. There was a crowd, the noise, the screams, the commotion. Jesus was there, among them, and everything seemed out of control. But there was a father, an ordinary man, maybe like you, trying to stay upright in a world that was falling apart from within. His son suffered from spiritual attacks. His father's heart broke into 1,000 pieces every time he saw him throwing himself on the floor, foaming, struggling, and there was nothing he could do except try to believe. But even that was difficult. He had heard about Jesus. Maybe this was the last chance. But when he finally had the master's attention, he couldn't hide his despair. He did not arrive with perfect faith. He didn't arrive with bold statements. He arrived with tears in his eyes and a phrase that became one of the most profound prayers ever made in the Bible. "I believe, help my unbelief." Mark 9:24. It was as if he said, "Jesus, I'm trying, but I'm failing. I want to believe, but something in me still doubts. Help me to truly believe." How many times have you felt this way? How many times have you found yourself praying with a broken heart and a mind full of voices saying, "You don't have enough faith. That's why you're still like this." You look at other Christians. You hear testimonies of miracles. You see people being used by God and you think, maybe my faith is too weak. Maybe I'm not able to hear from God like they can or rest in Him like I should. And the worst? You start to blame yourself. Move away. Silence. But Jesus reveals to you, it is not the strength of your faith that moves heaven. It is the sincerity of your heart. That boy's father was not despised for his doubt. Jesus did not rebuke him. He didn't turn his face away. On the contrary, he replied, because God doesn't require unshakable faith. He responds to sincere vulnerability. It's not about spiritual perfection. It's about real relationship. And here comes the twist. The most powerful faith is not always the one that lifts mountains, but the one that gets down on its knees and says, I can't do it alone. The faith that confesses weakness is the one that attracts grace, because where human strength ends, God's power begins. And when Jesus looks at someone who says, help my unbelief, he sees more faith there than in the empty cries of self-sufficiency. This is the key to resting. Your mind. Stop fighting to prove that you believe and start resting in the grace of those who know you are human and still choose you. God is not waiting for your faith to be perfect to speak to you. He is already whispering, even in your tears, even in your pauses, even when your prayer is just a tired sigh into the pillow. The boy's father saw the impossible happen. His son was freed, and not because he had gigantic faith, but because he had the courage to surrender his weakness to Jesus. This changes everything. Jesus reveals it to you. You don't need to hide from God in your moments of doubt. You can bring them to Him. He is not frightened by their weakness. He welcomes her and transforms it. If this message touched the deepest part of your heart, comment now, Jesus, help my tired faith. Maybe this is the comment that a desperate soul needs to read today to not give up. Share this video with someone who is struggling in silence. Your action could be the answer they were praying for. Jesus responds to the simplest, most tremulous, most imperfect faith, as long as it is sincere. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you isn't willing to continue living the same way. Because there is a thirst screaming in your soul, a hunger for real rest, an urgency for answers that the world cannot provide. And it doesn't matter if your faith is strong or fragile, if you believe boldly or cry out trembling inside. What matters is that Jesus heard. Yes, He heard. Even when you thought no one else would hear, even when you felt like you didn't deserve it, Jesus reveals you. He responds to sincerity, not performance. What you delivered now hurt, but it also freed. Because when you expose your weakness before God, you are not shamed, you are healed. Today you understand that you don't need to hide your pain, that you don't need to camouflage your doubts. Who can bring everything to the altar, just the way it is? Because transformation begins exactly at the point where you say, Jesus, I can't handle it. And if you thought you needed perfect faith to hear God's voice or rest fully in Him, now you know. It's not perfection that attracts heaven. It's surrender. It's a broken heart. It's the real cry. It doesn't matter if you arrived here in pieces. He knows how to rebuild, and He's doing it now. Right there inside you. Take a deep breath. Feel it. What you feel is not just emotion. It's the Holy Spirit touching something deep inside you. Jesus is calling you to a new level of rest. Not physical rest, but that which quiets the noisy mind, heals the fragmented soul, and teaches you to trust the unseen. And do you know what the next step is? Let's pray together now. But first, listen, this prayer is not an end. She is a start. Because the change that started here today will still unfold in the coming days, in your decisions, in your lonely mornings, and in the next videos you will watch. Liberation is in process, and you won't stop here. Close your eyes if you can, or just bow your heart. Lord Jesus, we thank you for every word that burned inside. Thank you that the Lord does not wait for our faith to be perfect. The Lord only waits for it to be true. And today, many of us come tired, broken, ashamed of our own weakness. But the Lord showed us that it is precisely in this place that your love enters most strongly. Therefore, now we surrender all unbelief, all fear, all confusion. Jesus, help our faith. Teach us to rest, silence the noisy mind, recognizing your voice in the midst of chaos, heal the wounded soul, free your exhausted mind. And now seals this transformation that has begun. May no seed planted here be uprooted. May true rest begin today and never end. In the name of Jesus. Amen. If you prayed with me, it's because God is doing something powerful in your life. And what comes now is even deeper. Because the video that appears on your screen is not just any video. It is the direct continuation of what God started here. What you will discover there could be what was missing for your complete liberation. Don't leave without watching. You need to see this. Comment now. I made it to the end. Your comment could be the strength that another heart needs to not give up. Share this message with someone who needs to feel like they are not alone. Submit now. Don't ignore this impulse. It could save a life. And if this word truly blessed you, if something was healed in there, subscribe to the channel. This isn't just clicking a button. It's saying, I've been given something, and I want to continue being transformed. It's also your way of giving back, of keeping this message alive so that others also find what you found here. Don't disconnect. Don't end this here. What God started in you has not yet finished. Click on the video that is on the screen now, because what you will hear will open your eyes like never before. And perhaps it is exactly the last piece that was missing for your faith to truly flourish. For the Lord is good, and his mercy endures forever. His faithfulness extends from generation to generation. Psalm 105:5. See you now in the next video. Jesus is waiting for you there.